Pope Francis has landed in Kenya for his three-country tour of Africa. He just landed in Kenya's capital city of Nairobi.
This is the Pope's first visit to the continent. He's planning on visiting Uganda and the Central African Republic. CBS News foreign correspondent Allen Pizzey is with us on the phone. Allen, what is the Pope's schedule for this trip?
Well, the Pope will spend 2 days here in Kenya, and then he moves on to Uganda for 2 days. Then he goes to the Central African Republic. He'll hold the masses in both Kenya and Uganda, but the Central African Republic is problematic. His security officials were there a few days ago checking the situation out. They've already said he has to curtail some of his 2-day visit there. The problem is that the Central African Republic has no government, and it's basically in the middle of a civil war, which is more or less between Christians and Muslims. So it's a very unsafe area. UN peacekeepers are there, but it's just not a safe place, and so there's a concern that he may have to cut that short. But he will be holding masses, meetings with young people, meetings with clergy here, both here in Nairobi and in Kampala, the Ugandan capital.
So then what will the focus of this trip be?
The Pope basically was coming here with a couple of messages. One, he will hammer home as much as he can his message about the environment, but more importantly, he's going to talk about, we think, corruption and what a bad thing it is and how good it is to have good, honest governments. He'll try to encourage young people in that respect. And the Catholic Church has a vested interest in Africa in that this is the largest growing community in the Catholic Church. There are more, 1 in 6 Catholics is now, 1 in 6 is now Catholic. And, they're getting more and more people, but they're also having competition, if you will, with the evangelical Christians and some Pentecostals, so there's that problem. And the church is basically at odds with African governments in several ways. One, the church's continued opposition to the use of condoms as a way to fight AIDS. A lot of African governments just don't see that as a sensible option, so he's got that issue. And within the Catholic Church in Africa, there are problems because not all priests in Africa remain celibate, and there's a problem here as the church sees it with polygamy in some societies. And so there's a lot of issues to deal with that relate both to theology and to the governance of the church and to the expansion of the Catholic Church and succoring and comforting the faithful who are under attack in several places in Africa by Muslims. Al-Shabaab in neighboring Somalia has murdered Christians here simply because they're Christian, and that is a security worry here in Nairobi because Al-Shabaab has conducted terrorist operations on Kenyan soil. So they're a bit worried about that, although you wouldn't know it. The security didn't seem excessive when we came in. People lined the road on the way in, and it's a very relaxed atmosphere, but that is an undercurrent here for sure.
Yeah, Alan, how surprising is it that Pope Francis decided to embark on this trip to Africa despite last week's deadly terror attack in Mali and then, as you were mentioning, the nonstop violence and war across these African nations?
It's not surprising at all. He simply doesn't recognize things like that. He thinks the way to treat that sort of thing is to just do what you do and stand up in front of it and say, no, this is wrong. We come in peace. We come in the name of God, whatever you want to say. And you don't bow down, you don't back down, and you don't step away. You just keep coming at them, and that's what he does. Funnily enough, on the plane, he comes down the aisle of the plane after we take off, and he greets each journalist individually and says hello and have a little chat. And I said to him, a lot of people are nervous about you making this trip. Are you nervous? And he said, what have I got to be nervous about? And I said, well, there are a lot of crazy people out there, and there are people who don't like Christians. And he laughed, and he said, what I'm most worried about are the mosquitoes. And I laughed and said, me too. And he said, well, have you got your spray? And then he laughed and walked on. And one of the other journalists actually gave him 2 cans of insect spray as well. He's just not fazed in any way. You want to blow me up, blow me up. This is kind of attitude. Just keep going. He's going to use an open Pope-mobile. They say that the Vatican looks at you like you're crazy if you ask him if he's wearing body armor, which he isn't, and they say, and they look at you like you're crazy if you ask. So He just goes in their face and says, here we are.
Incredible. Very telling exchange there. Allen Pizzey for us. Allen, thank you.
You're welcome.